Abandoned for nothing, a human's defiance. The planet was dead, a wasteland of rocks and broken metal, where the air was thin and the ground was cracked. No life existed here, only the forgotten, the ones who were thrown away like garbage. She lay there, her small body covered in dust, her silver skin bruised and weak. Her breath was shallow, her eyes barely opened. She had no strength left. She did not know how long she had been here. Hours? Days? Time had no meaning when you were waiting to die. They had sold her for nothing. Her own people, the ones who were supposed to protect her, had sent her away like she was worthless. The slavers didn't even want her. They had thrown her here, on this dead world, because she was of no use to them. She tried to remember her name, but it was gone, like everything else. She closed her eyes, accepting her fate. No one would come. No one cared. But then, she heard something. A distant sound. A low hum in the sky. Her mind was too weak to understand. Maybe it was a dream. Maybe it was death, finally coming for her. But it wasn't. It was a ship. The man who defied fate. Ethan Carter was tired. He had been traveling for days, searching for anything valuable. His old ship, the Nomad, needed repairs, and he needed money. That's why he was here. This abandoned planet was known as a dumping ground. Sometimes, people threw away machines that could still be fixed. But so far, he had found nothing. As he walked over the rocky ground, his boots kicking up dust, his scanner beeped. Organic life detected. He frowned. That was impossible. No one survived here. Still, he followed the signal. His gut told him to look. And then he saw her, a small figure, barely alive, lying in the dirt. Ethan stared. His first thought was that she was already dead. But then, she moved. Just a little. Just enough. His heart clenched. She was alien. Her silver skin, her strange markings. He had seen many species before, but she was different. Young. Weak. Dying. Someone had left her here to die. He knelt beside her, brushing away the dust from her face. Her eyes flickered open for a second. Just a second. But he saw the fear in them. She was afraid of him. He sighed. Easy, kid. I'm not gonna hurt you. She didn't react. Maybe she didn't understand. Maybe she was too weak to care. Ethan looked around. This place was empty. There was no one else. He knew what he should do. Walk away. Leave her. She was not his problem. But he couldn't. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't some noble warrior. He was just a man trying to survive in a cruel galaxy. Yet when he looked at her, abandoned, helpless, he knew he couldn't turn his back. With a sigh, he lifted her into his arms. She was light, too light, like she hadn't eaten in weeks. This is a bad idea, he muttered to himself. But he carried her back to his ship anyway. Not worthless. The Nomad's doors hissed open, and Ethan stepped inside, carrying the alien girl to the medical bay. It wasn't much, just an old healing pod he had salvaged long ago. He placed her inside, letting the machine scan her condition. The results were bad. Dehydration, malnutrition, internal injuries. She was barely hanging on. He leaned against the wall, rubbing his face. What the hell happened to you? She stirred slightly, her eyes flickering open again. For the first time, he saw her clearly. Large, dark eyes, filled with something between fear and exhaustion. She tried to speak, but no words came out. Ethan shook his head. Don't try to talk. Just rest. She didn't trust him. He could see it, and he didn't blame her. Someone had thrown her away like she was nothing. But she was still alive. And as long as she was breathing, he wasn't going to let her die. He wasn't sure why he cared. Maybe because he had been abandoned once too. Maybe because, deep down, he still wanted to believe that one life, even just one, was worth saving. As the healing pod did its work, Ethan sat beside it, watching over the girl. Somewhere outside, in the darkness of space, the ones who had left her to die were still out there. And if they thought she was worthless, they were wrong, because she was still here. And he wasn't going to let them have her, hunted for a secret she doesn't know. The ship rumbled as it left the dead planet behind. Inside the small medical bay of the Nomad, Ethan Carter sat in silence, watching the girl's chest rise and fall. Her breathing had steadied, but she was still unconscious, her silver skin looking even paler under the dim lights. The healing pod had stabilized her, but she was weak. Too weak. Ethan sighed, running a hand through his messy dark hair. What the hell was he doing? He had made a mistake bringing her here. He wasn't a hero, and he definitely wasn't someone who went around rescuing aliens. Yet, something about the way she had been thrown away like trash made his gut twist. No one deserved that. Not even an alien girl whose name he didn't know. The girl who remembers nothing. Hours passed. The hum of the ship was the only sound. Then, a small movement. Ethan turned sharply. The girl's fingers twitched. A weak breath left her lips. Then, slowly, her eyelids fluttered open. For a long moment, she just stared at the ceiling, unmoving. Then her gaze shifted to him. The moment she saw him, her body tensed. Fear. Ethan raised a hand. Easy, you're safe. She didn't speak, just stared. He sighed, leaning back. I found you on that rock. You were dying. I patched you up. Still, no response. Ethan frowned. Did she understand him? Can you talk? He tried again. A long pause. Then her lips barely moved. I don't know. Her voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper, but she spoke. Ethan narrowed his eyes. What do you mean? Her gaze dropped. Her fingers curled into fists. I don't know. Ethan waited. It was clear she was struggling to find the right words. Finally, she looked up again, something desperate in her expression. I don't remember. Ethan's jaw tightened. She had no memories. Not just her name. Nothing. That complicated things. Not as simple as he thought. Ethan exhaled, standing up. All right. Then let's start with the basics. He gestured around the ship. You're on my vessel, the Nomad. I'm Ethan Carter. Human. Ever heard of us? She hesitated, then gave a small nod. Yes, I think so. So you remember some things. I don't know, she whispered. It's all broken. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. Great. This was turning into more of a mess than he signed up for. But before he could say anything else, an alarm blared. Ethan's head snapped toward the cockpit. Incoming ship detected. The hunters arrive. Ethan moved fast, sliding into the pilot's chair and bringing up the ship's scanners. A red dot blinked on the screen. Someone's coming, he muttered. The girl flinched. Who? Ethan's fingers tightened on the controls. Let's find out. The incoming ship wasn't large, a fast hunter-class vessel. That meant only one thing. Bounty hunters. Ethan cursed under his breath. He tapped the scanner, checking for any outgoing signals. Had someone tracked him? Then he saw it. A faint signal, coming from inside his own ship. His eyes snapped to the girl. She saw his expression and shook her head. I didn't. I know, Ethan muttered, cutting the signal off. It wasn't her fault. It was something inside her. Something was broadcasting her location to the entire galaxy. And now someone had come to collect. Nowhere left to run. The bounty hunter's ship locked on, its weapons charging. Ethan gritted his teeth. He didn't have time for this. This is your last warning. A cold voice came through the comms. Surrender the girl. Ethan didn't reply. His mind raced. Why did they want her? Who the hell was she? He glanced at her. She looked terrified, her body trembling. She didn't know. She didn't know why they were after her. But Ethan knew one thing. He had already made his choice when he picked her up from that wasteland. There was no turning back now. Ethan punched the thrusters, sending the Nomad into a sudden violent spin. The bounty hunter's ship fired, but Ethan was already moving, dodging through space debris. Alarms blared. The girl gripped the edge of her seat, her breathing fast. "You might want to hold on," Ethan said. The ship shook as another blast narrowly missed. They weren't going to outrun this thing forever. Unless... Ethan's eyes flicked to the nav screen. There was a station nearby, a lawless outpost where criminals and smugglers hid. It was dangerous, but right now it was their only chance. A risk worth taking. Ethan turned to the girl. "What's your name?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "I don't have one." Ethan exhaled sharply. "Then we'll figure that out later. Right now, they had bigger problems." The Nomad dived toward the outpost, weaving through the asteroid field surrounding it. Behind them, the bounty hunter's ship followed relentless. The girl's heart pounded. She had no memory, no idea why she was being chased. But one thing was clear. She wasn't worthless. Someone wanted her badly enough to kill for it. And that meant she had a secret, one that could change everything. The escape that changed everything. The Nomad shook violently as another blast slammed into its shields. Warning lights flashed across the cockpit, alarms screeching through the ship. Ethan Carter gritted his teeth, yanking the controls hard to the right. His ship rolled sharply, dodging another plasma shot by inches. Behind him, the bounty hunter's vessel stayed locked on, relentless. The girl sat in the co-pilot's seat, her fingers gripping the straps of her harness. Her silver skin was even paler under the dim light, her dark eyes wide with fear. Ethan glanced at her. "You doing okay?" She blinked at him, shocked by the question. They were being chased. They were about to die. And he was asking if she was okay. I don't know," she stammered. Ethan smirked. "Yeah, me neither." Then he slammed the thrusters forward. The Nomad lurched into a steep dive, cutting dangerously close to a floating asteroid. Ethan skimmed the surface, kicking up a storm of dust and rock behind them. The bounty hunter followed fast. But Ethan was counting on that. Just before impact, he pulled up hard. The ship shot upward, skimming the asteroid's surface. The bounty hunter wasn't so lucky. The enemy ship clipped the asteroid's side, spinning wildly off course. Ethan didn't wait to see if they recovered. He punched the engines at full speed, diving toward the lawless outpost below. They weren't out of danger yet, but for now, they had a chance. A place where the law doesn't matter. The Nomad touched down on a landing pad inside the massive space station, its metal hull still smoking from the chase. Ethan powered down the engines, letting out a breath. "We made it." The girl unbuckled her harness, her hands still trembling. "Where are we?" Ethan ran a hand through his messy hair. "Nowhere good." The station was known as Haven's End, a floating city filled with criminals, smugglers, and people who had nowhere else to go. There were no rules here, no laws. If you had money, you could buy anything. If you didn't, you became someone else's problem. Ethan wasn't a stranger to this place. He had been here more times than he liked to admit. But right now, it was the only place where no one would ask questions. He turned to the girl. "We need answers, and I know someone who might help." She hesitated. "Can we trust them?" Ethan chuckled. "Absolutely not." Then he grabbed his coat and motioned for her to follow. The doctor who knew too much. They made their way through the crowded streets of the station. The girl stayed close to Ethan, her wide eyes darting around at the strange aliens, the flickering neon signs, the smell of oil and smoke. She had no memory of who she was, but something in her gut told her she had never been in a place like this before. Ethan led her to a small, rundown shop in a quieter part of the station. The sign above the door was barely lit. "Dr. Alric Vaugh, xenobiologist, no refunds." Ethan knocked. A mechanical voice answered, "Go away." Ethan knocked again, harder. The door slid open just an inch, revealing a single red cybernetic eye staring at him. "Carter." The voice was annoyed. "What do you want?" Ethan smirked. "Nice to see you too, Doc. I need a favor." Voss sighed and stepped back, letting them inside. The room was small and cluttered. Machines, screens, and alien samples stacked on every surface. Voss, an older human with half his face replaced by metal, sat in a chair, looking at Ethan with clear suspicion. Ethan motioned toward the girl. "She's in trouble. No memory. And someone's hunting her." Voss raised an eyebrow. "So, that's not my problem." Ethan crossed his arms. "Do a scan. Check her DNA." Voss rolled his eyes, but grabbed a small scanning device. "Fine. Hold still." The girl flinched as the cold metal touched her skin, but she didn't move. The machine hummed, glowing softly as it processed her data. Then, the screen flashed red. Voss froze, his cybernetic eye whirred, scanning the data again. Ethan leaned in. "What is it?" Voss looked at the girl, his expression suddenly serious. This is impossible." The truth she never knew. Ethan frowned. "Doc, you're scaring her. Just tell us what you found." Voss exhaled. "Her DNA. It's royal." Ethan blinked. "Royal." Voss nodded. "Not just royal. Extinct." The girl stiffened. "I don't understand." Voss turned the screen toward them. "Your genetic markers match the lost bloodline of the Zyran Empire." Ethan's stomach dropped. The Zyran Empire was one of the most powerful alien factions in the galaxy. But a century ago, their ruling family had been wiped out. Their entire bloodline. Gone. Or at least, that's what everyone thought. Ethan looked at the girl. She wasn't just anyone. She was the last of a royal family that wasn't supposed to exist. She swallowed hard. "But, if that's true, why was I left to die?" Voss shook his head. "I don't know. But if the wrong people find out who you are, you'll wish they had left you on that planet." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. This was big. Too big. The girl wasn't just being hunted. She was worth a fortune. And every bounty hunter, every mercenary, every power-hungry ruler in the galaxy would kill to claim her. Nowhere left to hide. A loud beep interrupted the moment. Vo's eye flickered, scanning something unseen. His face darkened. "You brought trouble with you," he muttered. Ethan stiffened. "What do you mean?" Voss pointed to the security screens. The bounty hunter's ship had landed. They were inside the station. Ethan's pulse quickened. "They must have tracked her signal," Voss whispered. "They're already looking." The girl's hands clenched into fists. Ethan turned to her. "Listen to me. We need to leave. Now." She nodded, her fear now mixed with something else. Determination. For the first time, she had something to fight for. Because now, she wasn't just a lost girl with no memory. She was a secret that could change the galaxy, and Ethan Carter wasn't going to let anyone take her. Uncovering the lies of the galaxy. The air inside Haven's End was thick with tension. The marketplace outside the medical shop buzzed with activity, smugglers bartering stolen goods, bounty hunters eyeing their next targets, traders selling weapons that weren't supposed to exist. But beneath the surface, something darker was happening. They were being hunted. Ethan Carter stood by the doorway, scanning the shifting crowds. The bounty hunters had arrived. They weren't moving fast. Not yet. They were searching, gathering intel, waiting for the right moment to strike. Inside, the girl sat on the medical table, her hands clasped tightly together. Her silver skin was still pale from the healing pod, her dark eyes filled with questions she couldn't answer. She wasn't just some forgotten orphan. She was the last of a royal bloodline that was supposed to be extinct. And now, the entire galaxy would want her dead. Ethan turned to Voss. "Can you remove the tracking signal?" The cybernetic doctor's metal fingers tapped against the scanner. It's embedded deep. More than just a beacon, it's genetic. Ethan frowned. Meaning? Vos exhaled sharply. Someone didn't just mark her. They designed her to be found, no matter where she runs. A cold feeling settled in Ethan's gut. They hadn't just abandoned her. They wanted her to be found. No escape, only war. A deep voice crackled through the station's intercom. We know you're here, human. Hand over the girl, and you live. Ethan cursed under his breath. The bounty hunters weren't waiting anymore. Vos glanced at him. Your ship is too hot. They'll be watching every exit. Ethan clenched his jaw. They were trapped. But running wasn't an option anymore. He turned to the girl. You trust me. She hesitated, but then nodded. He smirked. Good. Then don't die. Before she could ask what that meant, he pulled out his blaster, turned toward the door, and opened fire. A fight they couldn't afford to lose. The blast tore through the door, hitting the first bounty hunter square in the chest. The alien stumbled backward, growling in pain. Then, chaos erupted. Blaster fire filled the corridor, sparks flying as shots ricocheted off metal walls. Ethan ducked behind cover, pulling the girl with him. She had never seen anything like this before. The sound, the smell of burning plasma, it overwhelmed her. But Ethan didn't hesitate. He grabbed her wrist. Move. She ran. Bounty hunters poured into the corridor, weapons raised. Ethan fired back, covering their escape as they sprinted through the winding streets of Haven's End. They couldn't outrun them forever. They needed a way out. The message hidden in her blood. Ethan's mind raced. They had no ship, no allies, no plan. But there was one thing they did have. Secrets. The girl's bloodline was a mystery, but it was also a weapon. Ethan turned to Vos. You said her DNA had genetic markers, right? Vos nodded, ducking behind a supply crate. Yeah, so. Ethan's mind clicked into place. Genetic markers weren't just trackers. They were keys. What if she wasn't just meant to be found? Ethan said. What if she was meant to unlock something? Vos' cybernetic eye flickered. You're thinking like a lunatic. Ethan smirked. Yeah, but am I wrong? Vos hesitated. Then he grabbed his scanner again. There's one way to find out. He pressed the device against the girl's wrist. This time, instead of scanning for a tracker, he scanned for a command. The screen glitched. Then it lit up. A forgotten truth, a buried lie. A distorted holographic message appeared in front of them. It was grainy, old, but the voice was clear. It belonged to an alien woman. She had the same silver skin, the same dark eyes as the girl. She looked like her. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. Was this her mother? The hologram flickered. If you are hearing this, then we have failed. The girl gasped softly. The woman's voice was calm, but filled with sorrow. They betrayed us. The Zyran royal family was never wiped out. It was a lie. We were too powerful, too dangerous for them to control. So they erased us, hunted us, buried our history beneath their rule. Vos' cybernetic fingers twitched. Holy hell. The message continued. If you are my child, you are the last. But you are not powerless. They took everything from us, but they could not destroy the truth. And the truth is hidden inside you. The girl clutched her chest, her heartbeat racing. There is a place, a sanctuary beyond the outer rim. Find it, and you will find the truth. Find it, and you will find others like you. The hologram fizzled out. Silence. Ethan turned to the girl. You okay? She looked up at him, something new in her eyes. Not just fear, not just confusion. Purpose. I have to find that place, she whispered. Ethan sighed. Yeah, and 100 people are going to try to kill us before we get there. The hunters close in. A massive explosion shook the station. The bounty hunters had brought reinforcements. Ethan cursed. "We need a ship. Now." Voss pointed toward the docking bay. "Take mine. But if you scratch it, I'll kill you." Ethan grinned. "Appreciated, Doc." They bolted. Blaster fire filled the air. The girl ran faster than she ever had in her life. She wasn't just running for survival. She was running toward answers. They reached the docking bay. A small black stealth ship sat in the hangar, its engines already warming up. Ethan didn't hesitate. He shoved the girl inside, then jumped into the pilot's seat. The ship roared to life, just as the bounty hunters broke into the hangar. They fired. Ethan punched the thrusters. The ship blasted out of Haven's End, dodging laser fire as it disappeared into the void of space. A new mission, a new war. The girl stared out the window, watching the station grow smaller and smaller behind them. She had no memory of who she was, but she knew one thing now. She wasn't just some lost child. She was the last of something bigger than herself. And the people who had erased her family were still out there. Ethan leaned back in his chair, exhaling. Well, that could have gone worse. The girl turned to him. "What if we don't make it?" Ethan grinned. "Then we make sure they regret trying." She smiled for the first time. For the first time, she wasn't alone. And for the first time, she wasn't afraid. The battle against her own people. The stealth ship hurtled through space, its engines burning hot as it fled Haven's End. Inside, Ethan Carter gripped the controls, watching the scanners for signs of pursuit. They had escaped the bounty hunters. For now. The girl sat beside him, her fingers gripping the armrests of her seat. She had barely spoken since they left the station, but Ethan didn't blame her. She had just learned that her entire history had been erased, that the Zyran Empire, the people who were supposed to be her own, had wiped out her family, branding them as extinct. And now, she was the last one left. A living secret, one that the galaxy wasn't supposed to know existed. Ethan let out a breath and glanced at her. "You okay?" She hesitated, then nodded, but Ethan could see the storm behind her eyes. She wasn't okay. And she had every right not to be. The warning that came too late. The ship's console beeped. Ethan frowned, checking the scanner. A signal had been received, a warning. Voss's voice crackled over the comms. "Carter, if you can hear this, turn around. Right now." Ethan stiffened. "What's wrong?" Voss's tone was sharp. "You don't get it. The Zyran didn't just abandon her. They're still watching her. They wanted someone to find her, so they could find you." Ethan's stomach dropped. Before he could respond, the scanner lit up with red. Multiple ships had just entered their airspace. Ethan turned to the girl. "We've got company." Her eyes widened. "Who?" The answer came before he could say it. The Zyran Empire had arrived. Nowhere left to run. The screen showed 3 massive warships, sleek and dark, emerging from hyperspace. A cold voice came over the comms. "You are in possession of Imperial property. Surrender the girl." Ethan clenched his jaw. Imperial property. The girl flinched. She wasn't just being hunted. To them, she wasn't a person. She was a thing. A resource to be retrieved or destroyed. Ethan hit the comms. "Yeah, how about no?" The Zyran commander's voice was emotionless. "Then you will die." The warships opened fire. Outnumbered and outgunned. The first blast rocked the ship, sending sparks flying across the controls. Ethan cursed, yanking the ship into a steep dive, dodging the second explosion. The girl gripped the seat, eyes wide as space outside lit up with destruction. "They're too fast," she said, voice shaking. Ethan's hands were steady on the controls. "We don't have to beat them. We just have to be smarter." A massive destroyer loomed ahead, its laser cannons charging. Ethan spun the ship sideways, squeezing between the Zyran vessels, dodging incoming blasts by inches. But he knew they couldn't outrun them forever. They needed a way out. And fast. The girl they thought they killed. Then the girl gasped. Ethan turned. What? She clutched her head, her breathing sharp. Something was happening. A memory. A voice from the past. They will hunt you. They will never stop. But remember, child, your blood is not a curse. It is the key. Her blood. Her DNA. Her heartbeat pounded. The hologram had said there was a sanctuary, a place that held the truth about her past. And suddenly, she knew where to go. She looked at Ethan. I need the controls. Ethan hesitated. What? Trust me. He didn't know why, but he did. He let go, and she placed her palm on the scanner. The key that should not exist. The ship reacted instantly. The dashboard lit up with symbols Ethan had never seen before. The engines roared, pulsing with new energy. A hidden system activated, one that had been dormant inside the ship. The Zyran warships sensed the change. No, still up a hair, the commander's voice shouted. But it was too late. The ship jumped to hyperspace, without coordinates. They disappeared in an instant. The place no one should find. The jump felt different, not normal. Faster, deeper. The ship wasn't just traveling through space. It was following something. When they emerged, Ethan's breath caught in his throat. Outside the window, an enormous structure floated in the darkness, a forgotten station, hidden inside a dying star's orbit. It was ancient, covered in golden markings that pulsed like veins. The girl stared at it, her heart pounding. She didn't know why, but she belonged here. Ethan let out a slow breath. What the hell did we just find? The girl swallowed hard. The truth. The human who changed everything. The ship drifted in silence, floating in the orbit of a dying star. Outside the cockpit window, the ancient station loomed, a massive structure, forgotten by time. It was unlike anything Ethan Carter had ever seen. Golden veins pulsed along its surface, flickering like a beating heart. And yet, there was something wrong about it. The girl sat beside him, staring at the station with wide, unblinking eyes. She knew this place, but she didn't know how. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. All right, kid. You want to tell me what the hell is going on? She shook her head slowly. I don't know. But I feel like I need to go in there. Ethan sighed. Of course. Because why wouldn't they go into the creepy, abandoned space station that no one had set foot in for centuries? He checked the scanners. I'm not seeing any life signs. No movement. No traps. He frowned. This place is completely off the grid. Even the Zyran Empire doesn't have records of it. The girl clenched her fists. Then maybe that's why they wanted to erase me. Ethan's expression hardened. He didn't like this. Not one bit. But they had come too far to turn back now. All right, he said, flipping a switch. Let's go exploring. A dead station that wasn't empty. The air inside the station was heavy, like stepping into a place untouched for 1,000 years. Ethan's boots echoed as he stepped onto the metal floor. The girl followed close behind, her dark eyes darting around the massive corridor. Strange markings lined the walls, symbols that glowed softly as they walked past. This place is alive, she whispered. Ethan frowned. That's not creepy at all. They moved deeper inside, past hanging wires and broken terminals. The technology here was unlike anything in the known galaxy, old, yet somehow advanced beyond imagination. Then suddenly, the girl stopped. Her breath hitched. Her hands trembled. Ethan turned. What is it? She didn't answer. Instead, she stepped forward and placed her hand against one of the glowing symbols. The station reacted instantly. A low hum filled the air. Lights flickered awake, illuminating the long-forgotten halls. And then a voice spoke. Welcome home, last of the bloodline. The truth that should have stayed buried. The girl's heart pounded. The voice wasn't coming from a speaker. It wasn't artificial. It was inside her head. Ethan raised his blaster, looking around. Who the hell said that? The walls shifted, revealing a massive holographic projection. A figure appeared in front of them, a woman with silver skin and dark eyes, just like the girl's. The girl took a step back. The woman looked like her. "If you are seeing this, then our time has ended." The girl's breath quickened. "Who are you?" The hologram's gaze was sad. "I am not alive. I am only a memory, a record of the last ruler of Zirin." Ethan stiffened. This was the last empress, the one who was supposed to have died centuries ago. The girl shook her head. "I don't understand. What happened to my family?" The hologram's voice darkened. The Zirin Empire was never what it seemed. The rulers were not erased. They were betrayed. They feared us, feared what we knew, feared what we could become. So they turned against us, rewriting history, burying the truth. The girl's hands curled into fists. "They spared you because they did not see your value, but they knew one day you would return. That is why they placed the signal within you, to watch, to wait, to destroy you before you could remember who you are." Ethan's jaw tightened. So they were always planning to kill her. The hologram nodded. "Yes, but they were afraid of what she might awaken first." Ethan frowned. "What does that mean?" The hologram turned to the girl. "You are not just royalty. You are the key to what comes next." Ethan stiffened. That didn't sound good. The girl swallowed hard. "And what? What comes next?" The hologram's expression darkened. "The war that never truly ended. A sleeping power that should never awaken." The walls of the station rumbled, like something deep beneath them was waking up. The girl felt it inside her bones, something pulling at her, calling to her. Ethan grabbed her arm. "We need to leave. Now." But the girl couldn't move. A new presence filled the air, something old, powerful, and angry. It wasn't the hologram. It wasn't a memory. It was something alive. A deep, distorted voice whispered from the shadows. "You are too late." Ethan's blood ran cold. He turned, raising his blaster. But there was nothing there. The girl clutched her head, her heartbeat hammering. What is that?" The hologram flickered, looking up in fear. "It has woken." A sudden shockwave tore through the station. The lights flickered violently. The station wasn't abandoned. Something had been sealed inside it, and now it was awake. The Empire comes for its lost heir. The station's external alarms blared. Ethan's scanner flashed red. He swore under his breath. "We've got a problem." The girl turned to him, still dazed. "What?" Ethan grabbed her hand and ran. "The Zirin fleet just found us." The external cameras showed dozens of warships dropping out of hyperspace, surrounding the station. They weren't here to negotiate. They were here to erase her for good. The station trembled again, the deep voice whispering through its halls. "You cannot stop what has begun." The girl felt the truth settle in her bones. She wasn't just running from an empire anymore. She had unleashed something far worse. And now, the fate of the galaxy had changed forever. A new beginning, a promise kept. The ancient station shook violently, its walls trembling under the weight of forces unseen. Outside, the Zirin fleet had arrived, their warships surrounding the station like vultures, ready to wipe away the last trace of a forgotten past. Inside, Ethan Carter gritted his teeth, gripping the girl's wrist as he pulled her through the crumbling halls. "Move," he shouted. She ran, but her legs felt heavy. Her mind swirled with everything she had just learned. She wasn't just a lost child. She was the last heir to a fallen empire. And worse, something had been waiting for her inside this place. The station had held more than just the truth about her past. It had held a prison. And now, it had been opened. The voice that shouldn't exist. As they sprinted toward the docking bay, the deep voice whispered again, slithering through the air like a shadow. "You cannot run from fate." The girl stumbled, clutching her head. It wasn't just a sound. It was inside her. It knew her. Ethan pulled her back up. We don't have time for this. She forced herself forward, even as the voice echoed in her skull. You were meant to awaken us, and now you will watch them fall. A warship's last warning. Outside, the Zyran fleet loomed closer. The station's sensors detected 28 enemy ships, surrounding them from all angles. Ethan pulled up the ship's scanner, trying to find an opening. Nothing. A transmission crackled through the comms. A cold, commanding voice spoke. You will surrender now. There is no escape. Ethan smirked. Yeah. Well, I like my odds. The Zyran commander remained silent for a moment. Then, you misunderstand, human. We do not want you. We only want the girl. Ethan clenched his jaw. He turned to her. She already knew what they meant. Her people wanted to erase her existence. They weren't here to capture her. They were here to end everything she represented. And if Ethan handed her over, they might let him live. Might. The girl swallowed hard. You should let me go. Ethan stared at her like she had lost her mind. Not happening. She shook her head. Ethan, if I don't. Listen to me, he said, voice firm. I didn't drag you out of that wasteland just to throw you back to them. You are not their problem anymore. You are mine. She froze. No one had ever fought for her before. And now, this human, this stubborn, reckless, stupid human, was willing to go to war to keep her safe. The shadow that moved. But before she could say anything else, the station shuddered violently. A dark mist began to spread through the air, moving unnaturally, like it was alive. The deep voice returned, louder, stronger. You have woken us, and now the galaxy will burn. Ethan pulled the girl behind him, raising his blaster. I'm really starting to hate this place. The mist shifted, taking shape. A figure emerged, tall, gaunt, wrapped in the same golden symbols that pulsed across the walls. Its eyes were black voids, its presence wrong in ways Ethan couldn't describe. It tilted its head. You have your warships. I have my army. And then, the dead began to rise. An ancient enemy returns. The station screamed. From the shadows, metallic husks lurched to life. Not machines, not entirely flesh, but something in between. They moved with inhuman jerks, their eyes glowing with the same dark energy that swirled around the entity. The Zyran fleet fired first. Plasma rained down upon the station, ripping through the hull. But the shadow creatures rose from the wreckage, untouched, unfazed. Ethan grabbed the girl's arm. We are leaving. Right now. She couldn't move. Her body felt bound to this thing, this horror that had been waiting for her bloodline to return. The entity reached a hand toward her. Come, child. This was always meant to be. Ethan yanked her back. Like hell it was. He shouted, then raised his blaster and fired. The shot went straight through the shadow figure, hitting the wall behind it. It didn't flinch. Then it laughed. Ethan cursed. Oh, I hate this. He grabbed her by the wrist and ran. One shot, one chance. The Zyran fleet was locked in battle with the rising army. Warships exploded in space, sending debris scattering like falling stars. Ethan's stolen stealth ship was still docked, untouched. One chance. One shot. Get in. Ethan shouted as he threw himself into the pilot's seat. The girl followed, her heart hammering. The ship roared to life just as the station began to collapse. Ethan didn't hesitate. He punched the thrusters. The ship blasted out of the wreckage, dodging falling debris, slipping past the Zyran warships that were too distracted fighting the horror they had unknowingly unleashed. Then, they were gone. A future they had to write themselves. Silence filled the cockpit. The girl stared out the window at the burning wreckage behind them. The station was gone, swallowed by the darkness of the dying star. And yet she knew. The war had only just begun. She wasn't safe. She never would be. But she wasn't alone anymore. Ethan exhaled, leaning back in his chair. That was insane. Let's never do that again." The girl let out a small, shaky laugh. Agreed. A pause. Then she looked at him, her expression more serious. "What now?" Ethan smirked. "Now, we disappear. Find somewhere safe. Figure out our next move." She hesitated. "You're staying with me." He glanced at her. "You seriously think I went through all that just to drop you off somewhere?" She blinked, surprised. For the first time in her life, someone wasn't leaving her behind. Ethan sighed, kicking his feet up. "But next time, kid, I'm picking the job. No more ancient space horrors, just nice, simple smuggling gigs. Maybe a bar fight or two." She smiled, a real smile. For the first time, she had a future, one that she got to choose. And this time, no one was taking it from her.